Yo, what's going on, everyone? Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we're returning to the portable devices, checking out Superman Countdown to Apokolips for Game Boy Advance.
Released in 2003, this was developed by Mystic Software and published by Atari. It's based on the Superman animated series, just like our last couple games were. Hopefully this is a little bit better than any of those were. Let's find out.
Alright, well, check this shit out. Look at this opening screen. Look at some of these stills. That's pretty impressive. And then we get to the game and you have this isometric view. Kinda threw Jim and I for a loop because in most of our experiences, isometric games usually are strategy, point and click, or even RPGs. But it looks pretty goddamn decent. There is a lot of coloring, the sprites look pretty good, and the shadows look good even. Shit. There's not a whole lot to complain here. Obviously, because it is handheld, it is limited in its capacity. But still, Jim and I, we were actually legitimately impressed with this. So, I can't point out all the issues I had with it. Sometimes the colors, I just don't think the people who were color mixers, like some of this shit is too bright in some areas. But like I said, that's being more nitpicky than anything. As you see from our scores, I gave it a 7, Jim gave it an 8, and I'm just going to add one beer just because I have kind of a bias against isometric games. Sue me. Don't sue me. Sue Jim. Fuck him.
Well, fuck you too! Jesus! Anyway, the sound. The sound's fine. It's not great. It's not bad. It's perfectly fine. The sound effects that you get are okay, but you don't get enough. The music you get's okay, but it's not really dynamic or memorable. It's fine. And...
Stop using fine!
I'm sorry! Considering that the Game Boy Advance doesn't have the best sound chip in the world, it's capable of a lot better, but this is passable, and it's average, so we gave it 5s. And as far as score goes, I'll just add one beer just for being so damn bland.
So remember about a minute ago when I said I have biased against isometric games? Yeah, that comes into play right now with the control. I hate moving on 90-degree axes from this view, because it just gets annoying for me. Sometimes I'm trying to shoot my lasers, and it does a decent job when you're zooming in on some of these heat mines or things like that, but a lot of the time I kept missing my enemies, and the hitboxes in this game, holy shit, were sometimes annoying. Other than that though, it's responsive enough. They do give you the nice option of having a specific button for almost everything. You have a fly button, a run faster button, punch button, laser eyes button, but the one thing that kind of took me a while to figure out was how to use your freeze breath, because you got to hold down 2 buttons at the same time. So when you're a few beers deep, that can get a little bit annoying. Other than that, if you're an expert at isometric games, or you're just used to them or don't give a shit, then you really won't mind this. As you see from our scores, I gave it a 5, Jim gave it a 6. Like I said, it's slightly above average. Nothing that's going to hinder your gameplay experience. And as far as beer, I'm going to add 1 just for one simple reason. This is probably more of a gameplay thing. Why do they need to point out what superpower you have to use exactly before you use it? Fuck!
The gameplay. It's alright. So this game kind of follows a formula that a lot of the other Superman games do, where there's only a couple of different game modes. They go in a certain sequence, and it repeats from level to level. So when you start a level, you're in the city, you're running all around, going to different objectives, saving people, stopping crime, stuff like that. And then there's a boss fight. And you do it again and again and again. The bosses can be pretty tough, and it'll take you a while to really understand their weaknesses, their patterns, and it isn't just a simple like timing hits and stuff. Some of them you can only hurt them after doing specific things or using certain superpowers. So it's at least refreshing to see that that level of thought was put into it. Besides that, like Brian said before, there is a shitload of story in this game. So it really tries to give you a full Superman experience. This game almost seems to be a little too ambitious for a typical handheld, but overall it's a perfectly acceptable game, if just a little unremarkable. It's a little choppy, it's a little rough around the edges, but there is fun to be had here, even if it gets repetitive and boring. So I've talked enough. We both gave it 5s. And as far as beer goes, I'll give it... what the hell. I'll give it 2 beers for the 2 main play modes.
Alright, the obvious thing with the originality in this game comes from, once again, the isometric view. Never seen that in a Superman game, and you never will unless they do it sometime in the future. Putting that aside, they also are unique, and this was part of those slew of games that really started making you use your powers for specific enemies or specific situations. So that was semi-unique. Other than that, the story, although it is inspired heavily from the animated series, it is an original story. Granted, all Superman games are basically go save citizen from enemy, go fight robot, have gangsters shoot at you, yada yada yada. This one went pretty deep with an original story for Superman, so we gave it points for that. Now with all that being said, we still could only muster up a 4 for this guy. Why? Because everything else is something we've seen in one way or another, and we feel 4 is just the fairest score we could give. As far as beers, I'm going to give 2 beers, just for my feeble attempt to explain why the hell we scored it at a 4.
Alright, the replayability. It's really simple, honestly. We gave it 4s, and for 2 real specific reasons. The first being, like most of these Superman games, it's a hard one. You need to play it again and again to know where enemies come from, how to beat them, how to beat the bosses, blah 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 blah. You get the idea at this point. But it's also a portable handheld game. So if you have it in your sack full of games and you're on the road, you're probably going to be prone to pick it out and play it every once in a while. So we had to at least give it a point for that. As far as beer goes, I'm going to give it 1 beer just for the 1 game mode.
Overall, this is a shit ton better than that other Superman game for the Game Boy. It's got really, really good graphics for the time, and if you enjoy these type of games, then there is fun to be found. However, like Jim mentioned a few times, goddamn, that story mode and some of the dialogue will get really annoying. Here's a little fun tip. Hold down select. Both Jim and I, not saying it was due all to the alcohol, didn't realize that that's what you had to do to skip over. So we suffered for a couple minutes until we finally realized how to get past it. With that being said, we both gave it a 5. It's definitely right on that average line. Like Jim said, don't waste too much money, but if you're a diehard Superman fan and you need to play one of his games on the go, definitely choose us over that other piece of shit. When we combined all of our scores together, it's a 5.1, which is right on line with how we feel. It's just a smidget above average. So, yeah, I guess give it a try if you really, really want to.
And if you find it cheap, it's worth a couple bucks.
So when picking a beer, we wanted to choose something that's slightly off the beaten path and is probably slightly better than most would accept. I'm of course talking about the Leinenkugel Summer Shandy. Granted, some craft beer snobs may hate the summer shandies or Leinenkugel in general, but anyone who's had it knows it's not really that bad. It's also not really that talked about. So, we figure if you're out playing this game, you might as well be outside or doing something. Why not pick up a 6-pack of this? Enjoy yourselves, and remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.